Hey, all, welcome back to the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. I am Darren. I'm your host, of course. Today, I have a special guest, Mr. Jason Perlow. He is one of the co-founders of the website eGullet, also a food blogger and a technology reviewer for both ZDNet and CNN. I'll be right back. We'll talk to Jason.
Smoking, grilling, getting hot and hotter, sous vide and chilling from fire and water.
Hey all, it's Darren, and I want to take a second to talk to you about the high-powered torches from Grill Blazer, the grill gun and sous vide gun. I was lucky enough to be a part of this project long before it was a Kickstarter, and I love them. If you're looking for something to sear your food within seconds, check out the sous vide gun. If you're looking for a torch to light your grill and have it up and cooking within 5 minutes, your lump or briquettes, check out the grill gun. It can also light outdoor fire pits and your fireplace within minutes. Check it out, guys, at the link below and get 10% off your order. Check out the grill gun and the sous vide gun by Grill Blazer. Welcome back to the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast, guys. I am here with a new guest, Jason Perlow. Actually, I just found out about Jason not too long ago. We kind of stumbled across each other on a Facebook group, and we were actually both talking about the Innova Precision Oven, or it was the Joule Oven, I think.
Yeah.
Jason's got some history that really intrigued me because I've talked to a lot of people Jason knows. So Jason right now works for, he's a food blogger and a tech expert. He works for CNN and ZDNet and does some other stuff. So Jason, welcome to the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. Go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know who you are.
So my name again is Jason Perlow, and I'm 52 years old, and I have been involved in the computer industry since the early 1990s. And I consider myself primarily a techie with a heavy food addiction and and cooking and food technology addiction. So I am first and foremost these days a writer. I come from the technology systems integration background, former IBM, former Microsoft, former, Wall Street technology, financial industry consulting back in the day. But now I am primarily a writer. So a writer of technology reviews. I review restaurants locally here in South Florida. And of course, I run a foodies discussion group on Facebook, with that community of about 6,500 people on it.
So you got basically interested in food a long time ago, but I guess your career was technology, but you kind of tried to mix the two back, I guess, in the early 90s, or how long ago was it?
So, I've always been interested in the intersection of, technology and food. I think, because, I love science fiction, and, you watch Star Trek enough, and you see food kind of like magically appear on the Enterprise. Wow, that seems fantastic. I can have any meal that I want just on the touch of a button and talking to a computer. Well, we can talk to computers now, but food doesn't just kind of magically appear yet, right? So we're still getting there. But I always felt that, food preparation technology and the modernization of the kitchen, you look at like the Jetsons and all the cool things that, were on those TV shows in the 60s, all the promises that we had during the various, when my parents went to the 1964 World's Fair, and they had, all the companies, GE there demonstrating the kitchen of the future. We never quite got there. But we're starting to get there. I think in the last 5 or so 10 years, I think that progression is, that realization of having that fully automated or very sophisticated kitchen that helps, I guess, amateur cooks cook more like restaurant cooks is becoming more of a reality.
Yeah, it's like one of my favorite rides, believe it or not, at Disney World is the Carousel of Progress.
Yes.
We take the kids on it just to torture them because me and my wife think it's cool because it's been there forever. And it does that. It goes through the world. It was a World's Fair exhibit, initially.
They moved those all to Epcot, right?
Yeah.
And they look incredibly dated, but it's fun to look at it,
yeah, but I mean, it's still, when you sit there and you watch the stuff and yeah, well, you can look at what's going on today and look back to when me and you were young. My mom would never understood what a sous vide,
Right.
circulator was or anything like that.
Right.
So to me, I'm really intrigued about all the different, growth of technology in both indoor and outdoor cooking. I mean, it's growing all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, with the pellet grills that are, Wi-Fi, functionality with built-in
Yes.
recipes and all kinds of stuff now that you can find, so that's why this is really, gets my juices flowing when I like talking about this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So
Yeah.
even though it's not my career, I mean, I was in restaurants back when I was younger, my 20s. I worked in restaurants and worked in kitchens, but I haven't, I've always loved cooking and I've always loved technology when you can put them together and different cooking methods and stuff. It's really what intrigues me. So let's talk about eGullet. What got you started? You're one of the founders of eGullet, which is actually a birthplace of, you could say, modernist cooking, right?
Yes. Yeah. A lot of cool people got their start on that site. And this was, of course, pre-Facebook. We launched it in early 2000. And then we launched it because
it's an old bulletin board type.
It was an old bulletin
group.
board type, old bulletin board type thing. And we went through a couple of different pieces of bulletin board software at the time, but there were a few food discussion communities on the internet at the time. There was the FidoNets and the internet news groups, and the various. Chowhound was started in like 1998 or something like that, and that was kind of like a homebrew piece of software that the guy Jim Leff started. I wanted to assist him to try to modernize the software stack because I knew how much money it was going to cost for him to host it with the technology he was using. It was not optimized for the type of traffic he was getting. But I ended up with Stephen Shaw, who was, at the time he was nominated for a, James Beard Award for some of the writing that he was doing. And he was a very, up and coming prominent food writer. We decided that, we can do this. We can start a food discussion website. We can blend the opinions and the various the opinions, and also I think the edginess and quirkiness of home cooks and the sort of the restaurant and food community of New York City at the time, with also the professional chefs, because we knew those professional chefs, and I think that and I think it was really the first website of its kind where you could have a Tony Bourdain talking to a home chef or a working mom or a single or a homemaker, instructing a homemaker on how to make a proper cassoulet or something like that, and so I think it was unusual. It was groundbreaking at the time for what it did, and it became more popular because it really didn't. It started to gain a lot of traction after September 11th, because it was a place where the restaurant community could talk to each other, talk to the staff, help people get new jobs, just to check up on people and see if they were okay. And that really caused the site to really take off at that time. And so it was an interesting. It was an event. It was a terrible event that really caused that site to gain a lot of attention in the national and international press, and we started to get coverage all over the place. New York Times, LA Times, Boston Herald, Chicago, various different international newspapers. We started to bring in more experts from outside of the country and outside of the New York metro area. So it was an interesting. It was an interesting confluence of events that kind of created this really dynamic, very active food discussion community. And I think it would be hard to duplicate that today, given the way that the platforms currently run now. And it was much more freewheeling. The discourse, I think, was a very different type of discourse than we have today on social networks. Now everyone's afraid of getting,
Facebook jail, yeah.
And that happens, and I get in Facebook jail probably once a month now. And I don't know why it happens to me. I mean, it's for things that I would consider. I mean, Bourdain used to F-bomb on a continual basis on eGullet, and he liked it because we didn't censor him. But I don't. But I think the type of discourse that you would get back in the late '90s and early 2000s would get you Facebook jailed in 2 seconds. So it's a different time. But I think it had some very groundbreaking discussion that occurred there that spurred off a lot of different things for a lot of different people. Simon Majumdar, who's big on the Food Network now, he got his start on eGullet. Kenji got a lot of his start on eGullet. The Alinea, the restaurant in Chicago, that was one of the very first, I would say, molecular gastronomy type restaurants. Granted shots, he got it. The restaurant, we worked on a project with them to basically launch the restaurant on eGullet, up all the way from the design of the silverware and the plates and all the different things that they used, and kind of beta testing the recipes for the dishes. We also were responsible for hosting the first major sous vide discussion in the United States. Mervold at the time was experimenting on it for his book series that he was going to publish, which we now know as Modernist Cuisine, that giant, $3,000 tome of,
right.
of stuff. Was when he was developing it, he basically was engaging a lot of folks on eGullet about their techniques, whether they were using sous vide units. Really, at the time, only the top probably 4 or 6 restaurants in New York City had sous vide circulating, like Le Bernardin or Trocgro or Jean Georges, all the top French restaurants, they were using $2,000, $3,000 circulator units. We did not have Anovas and Jules and $50, $60 things you stick in a pot at the time. They were much more sophisticated. So we were at the time, we were developing the timings for some of these more advanced recipes. Obviously, sous vide was around much longer. Sous vide was developed in like the 1970s for the French railway industry at a much different scale of production for the type of things that they wanted to do than a 4-star restaurant would have done. I would say even in the late 90s, early 2000s, sous vide was not as common as you thought it might be. If you want to precision cook a nice piece, an expensive piece of fish or something, but not like it wasn't like used for everything back then. What
eGullet did is it brought a lot of, like you said, the home chefs and restaurant chefs and some of the higher echelon people all together to have these conversations and say, hey, I can probably do this if I take my crock pot and put this, Inkbird, timer on it to control it, so that's a lot of DIY stuff started coming out of those discussions. And you had people like, Douglas Baldwin, who put together his sous vide, pasteurization tables and all this kind of stuff that came out of eGullet. So I think that's one of the most amazing things is what came out of eGullet was all these people getting together, from the novice to the, scientists to the, professional chefs that have been doing it a while. And they all, put it all together and they all fed off of each other. And it just turned into something, what we have now. I don't think if an eGullet wasn't around back then, it probably would have took a lot longer for sous vide to catch on and to be what it is now.
Very, very probably. Yeah. There were obviously a lot of development that allowed miniaturized, inexpensive sous vide products to come to the market. Anova was kind of like in the early alpha beta testing stages of when they were talking to us, I would say like around 2005, 2006, when they were first discussing their initial stick product. But I think, the microcontrollers, the ability to have these, mass produced heat elements, inexpensive PIDs, right? We talk about this thing called the PID, or the proportional integral derivative controller, which is essentially a control loop, is what we call in the computer industry or the industrial automation industry. And it really does a fairly simple thing, which is to, use a thermostatic sensor to understand how do you bring something up to temperature and stabilize that temperature over a desired period of time, right? And we see it used in all kinds of things. I first actually started using PIDs in barbecue control. I was not really interested in sous vide in my house. I was interested in sous vide going in restaurants that were using it, but I didn't really feel the need to be a 4-star Michelin restaurant in my house. I was more concerned about, was I going to overcook my ribs or overcook my brisket or overcook, my pork in the smoker. And, the great thing about the PID controllers for barbecues is that they're not, you hook up a fan to the air intake, and, you have your pit probe and you have your meat probe, and you set that thing to, 225 or 240 or whatever you want, and it'll maintain that temperature regardless of whether or not it's raining outside or it's cold or it's windy or whatever. It will compensate all that stuff for you. And, a lot of people say, well, that's cheating, Jason. It's taking the manliness at a barbecue, but I don't care. I just want results.
Yeah, I when I first started using that stuff, or that stuff started getting more popular, even with sous vide, people will say, because I was, not to say I was the first one, because I know there was other people mixing sous vide and barbecue.
Yeah.
When I discovered sous vide, or when I stumbled upon it myself, that's what I first thought, because I was always big into barbecue, and I always, like to cook inside too. But when I saw sous vide and what it could do, the first thing that came to my mind is, wow, this would be great to be able to cook a brisket medium rare and still be able to put it on the smoker and get some smoke to it. Because the only other way you can make a brisket tender is cooking it to over 200 degrees, and it's got to be well done. So that's what I saw, the benefits of sous vide, just being able to cook some of these meats that, you normally you would have to cook them super well done just to make them tender, where you could actually use the lower temperature and the longer time with that sous vide allows that, to make it, hey, I can make it medium rare or medium, and it'll be a totally different experience than cooking a Franklin's brisket. And that's one of the things people get, well, which one's better? I've never been about which one's better. They're all good and they're all different. I like to make, meats all different kinds of ways. It's like, I always used to tell people, do you only eat fried chicken, or do you have roasted chicken, and do you have chicken fried rice? I mean, you eat chicken 500 different ways and cook it 500 different ways. You can do that with everything.
All these tech products, they're tools, right? And they're supposed to help you be more precise with your cooking so that you can achieve the results you want. That's really what this is all about, is achieving results. And it doesn't bother me that we're altering from the traditional way of cooking something,
right,
if it achieves the proper results, right? Or different
results. If you make something that you couldn't make any other way before, that's
very possible.
That's with me. It's like, what other way could you make a medium rare brisket and still make it smoky with them, unless you're using sous vide and barbecue together?
Yeah, and I think there's also the understanding that we now know a little bit more about food science with some of these things, right? It doesn't make sense necessarily to smoke a brisket for 16 hours. You might be able to just smoke it for 8 hours to get the smoke penetration you want, and then sous vide it the rest of the way and get just as good results. So these computer technologies that are all being used, they're all converging now. And we see these other products that are coming out, like, the Nova Precision Oven, I think, is a great product. But it's not a perfect product, because I think you do need a certain level of expertise beyond just, basic home cook to be able to use the thing. If you don't have any prior cooking experience, that is going to be a hard learning curve product to learn how to use properly. If you do have cooking experience, it's a great product. The other thing that Breville is doing, kind of their approach is, here's how you cook or try to replicate restaurant results if we guide you every step in the way and tell you what to do, and then the oven will do its thing, right? It's obviously, it's not a sous vide. It does have computer controlled heating oven elements and fan and all that kind of stuff to try to manage your temperature better. I think we can do those things now.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I want to get back to eGullet, because I think that's kind of where it didn't. I guess this technology probably would have came about, but it might have been took a lot longer, because what that actually I think did was foster that let's all work together kind of thing, and what can we do, and all these people started putting things together, like you talked about Nathan Myhrvold with the modernist cuisine, and then Douglas Baldwin got when I had him on, he talked about eGullet, how much that inspired him, and Kenji, and a lot of these people, they had so much fun collaborating on this type of stuff, and well, what if we did this, or what if we did that? And I think that's what inspires a lot of us. And you see it now, it's snowballing, because you got more and more people getting involved, because you got groups on Facebook and all that. The eGullet was one of the incubators and first to do it, but now you got a lot more ways to collaborate with people, and I think people just love doing that. So when you started eGullet and it started really taking off, what did you see as far as the growth go, and how did that come about?
It was unpredictable growth. I mean, it got way more popular than we ever thought it was going to get. And I think just because there wasn't enough places online for people to have this sort of discussion. Like I said, we had Chowhound, and there was us, and there was, at the time there were, cooking groups on America Online, and also I think Prodigy back in the day. If anybody remembers what the hell that was, that's how my wife and I met. We met on Prodigy.
Yeah, and I used to be back when eGullet was, around. I was on a bunch of different forums, we'd call them, for different things. There was any kind of interest you had, there was all these, little chat rooms somewhere you could find them, and with people talking about all kinds of stuff. And like I said, what gets me is that, eGullet was just one of those where you had so many different people with so many different backgrounds that had all the love for food, and they threw all their expertise into what they could contribute to.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, I've seen people try to recreate these communities online on Facebook. Some of them are successful, some of them are not. But I think the difference between the discourse that we have now versus what we had then was everybody is doubting expertise now. I'll go on and I'll say something. I'm like, well, okay. And someone says, I'm like, well, that's incorrect. But if you really want to do it this way, do it this way. And it goes, and people get like loony crazy. Like, who are you to hell to tell me that I'm doing it wrong? And what kind of background do you come from? I said, well, I kind of invented food blogging. And people laugh at me, but then I kind of have to, I'm like, look, here's a link to all my stuff. I don't want to have to go through this explanation again. I'm like, but it's weird. It's weird when you've lived through the golden age of kind of food discussion. And then now we're trying to just kind of redo it on Facebook. And, it's just not, Facebook's technology may be more sophisticated, but it's not better than what we had as far as the bulletin board stuff. At least on the bulletin boards, we could have topic areas. We could have, different sub bulletin boards for different areas of this. I would love, in my Florida group to be able to have, all right, I would love to be able to narrow it down by, I want counties, I want cuisines, I want cooking versus shopping, tag clouds and stuff. And you could do all that with software in 1995.
Yeah.
And you can't do that now. Now everything with Facebook is one giant scroll, and then people repeating topics over and over and over because they don't want to use the search bar. Right.
Oh, yeah. So and they ask the same questions over and over again. So, one of the things that gets me, because I have several Facebook groups as well. And, you get somebody that joins, they got their sous vide circulator last week, and then I don't know where some places they make their own recipes up, and hey, I just did a steak at 110 degrees for 6 hours, and it turned out great. And it's like, okay, you did it wrong, because let me explain to you why. And then it's like you said, they give you an attitude like, well, who are you to tell me? And it's like, well, it's called science, and here's some places you need to go look and kind of review
might not want to eat that 110-degree steak.
Yeah, it's okay if you cook it for an hour, but when you cook it for 6 hours, it's a little different.
That's dangerous. Highway to the danger zone, as Kenny Loggins would say.
But yeah, you do have a lot of that, but that's one of the reasons why I created my own Facebook groups, is because some of the other larger Facebook groups that I was participating in before, even the admins didn't care, so they would just they were even worse than some of the members. So
I've been thrown off more food groups than you could possibly count on Facebook. It's ridiculous now, but it's weird. It's like people have a very strange perception of like what an attack is. Like, you attack me, I'm like, no, I'm just correcting you, or I'm trying to show you
trying to help you
information. I'm trying to help you. I'm not attacking you. Just because I don't agree with you doesn't mean I'm attacking you. Attacking is an ad hominem.
Yeah,
that's different.
If I call you you a name for no apparent reason, that's attacking. But if I'm trying to help you, explain to you why what you did is wrong, or here's a better way to do it, that's not attacking.
No. It's weird though. I wonder if it never happened in 1990 in 2000, 1999, like we did, if it would ever, if some of these things would have ever happened. I don't know. Or where we would be now.
So where did you springboard from eGullet? I guess you had some issues with the your partners. They wanted to go a different way, and you decided you wanted to move on.
They want everything has, like, I feel honestly a limited lifespan in terms of when they peak in terms of some of these communities. I think that most of these tends to peak after 5 years or 10 years. The fact that it's still around is actually a testament to how valuable it still is, because all those threads from 2000 are still there on that thing. But I had a disagreement with the guy I founded it with. Eventually, we made up and we were still friends. He passed in 2015 at the age of 45. So I had an early disagreement with him, and I decided I wanted to go my own way. So I formed my own food blog for New Jersey, food writing, New Jersey, New York City, and also national, food writing. Whenever I would go someplace on a business trip or something, I would showcase different restaurants. And I had a general interest in food photography at the time. So I kind of honed my skills on that PowerShot G7, all those stuff that's now sitting in Flickr now. Writing about New Jersey restaurants, and I also wrote for the New York Times for a bit. So Off the Broiler was my food blog, and I ran it for 10 years. I stopped doing it when I came down to South Florida, and decided that I don't want to be a food blogger anymore. I don't want to restart my creds in South Florida as a food blogger. Right. I'm getting too old for this, So I decided, I looked at Facebook as a potential way to, one, I don't have to have an investment in a website that I have to spend money on. Let Facebook own the platform and just let me use whatever tools they want and reach out to, the local people. What I did notice on Facebook was there was an absence of highly critical restaurant food discussion, right? So the Sun Sentinel, which is part of the Tribune, newspaper organization, started their own Facebook group called Let's Eat South Florida. And for, 3 years, around from 2018 onward, I was maybe 2016 onward. But in 2016, 2018 or so, I was like their number one poster, their number one content provider. I was giving them very, very detailed restaurant reviews with lots of pictures and stuff. And what ended up happening is that, when you're a strong voice in one of these groups, sometimes people resent it. They resent your ability either to communicate, they resent your ability to market yourself, whatever it is. I gave them free content. Eventually I was on the outs with them. It was unfortunate. So I decided, I said, you know what? I'm going to run my own one of these things. I'm not going to, number one, allow commercial posts. I don't allow any restaurants to post advertisements of any type, which probably limits the amount of volume that we could possibly have, the amount of members. I'm not going to allow any people nonsense attacks on people. I'm not going to allow, the same garbage, posts over and over and over and again. We're going to limit, the topics, and then we're going to limit the discussion to what we want to talk about. And I run it with an iron fist. People seem to like it. I don't know why. I do more and more things to drive people away from it, and yet people keep joining. But so that's kind of like why I run this. I want people to not be afraid to be critical of the local restaurants in terms of, and unfortunately in South Florida, the dynamics are such that, one is we have a lot of expensive real estate, and two, we have a lot of, I would say, mid-range, mediocre places. Like we have way too many Italian restaurants, way too many pizza places, way too many quote unquote Thai sushi places. And so the authentic sort of stuff is kind of not as well advertised, because these are small businesses. They don't have the capital as some of these larger restaurant groups to do this stuff. And the more higher end restaurants, the better restaurants, quote unquote better restaurants, are usually the more tourist visible areas, because South Florida is a highly tourism oriented economy, right? So all the seafood places and whatnot are all by the water, right?
Right.
or in near the beaches, near the big condo communities and all that. And I'm not really interested in expensive dining. What I want is authentically good stuff, whether it's low end or if it's high end, right? And we do not have enough of it. So that is the stuff that I'm trying to showcase. So for example, the question that we get all the freaking time, or you'll see it in Let's Eat South Florida Sun Center, which has 75,000 members. Where can I get Chinese food? Okay, well, what kind of Chinese food do you want? Well, I want, New York style Chinese food. I'm like, okay, no. So I did a list that I wrote on Google Docs of, I basically, inventoried every real Chinese restaurant in South Florida, and which I've been to most of them, and basically rated what they were good at and what they weren't good at, et cetera. And that is a very highly circulated document for people looking to eat legitimate Chinese food. That's something that I think, is of value to people. Like where can they get the real stuff? And I also did this recently for South Florida waterfront restaurants. We built a spreadsheet of over 200 restaurants in Southeast Florida that are located on the water, so that people know where these places are, right? And with some ranking of whether or not they were good, bad, or indifferent.
Well, and that's good, because you said, it's not, you're listing ones that maybe people won't know about or wouldn't know about, right, because they don't have the marketing budget, or they're not part of some big, multi-chain type, group where they've got, all this money out there they can put into the all the travel, magazines and all that kind of stuff to get their names out there. Yeah, I used to live down in South Florida. I lived in Fort Lauderdale and Boca and all that for a while. Yeah, so I know what's down there. And back when I was down there, I lived in the 80s. Everything that everything was on the intercoastal. You had Benihana's and all that kind of stuff. Down there by the intercoastal and Fort Lauderdale.
And it's not that we don't have good food down here. I mean, we do. I mean, but people have to get out of their comfort zone. Like I tell people, you got to check out the Latin American places and things. You got to try the Venezuelan. You have to try the Colombian. You have to try the Peruvian. These are the things where these are the ethnic groups that have strong communities here. So of course they're going to have good restaurants. Chinese restaurants, we have a total of maybe 38,000 Chinese people in South Florida total. That in New York City you have 750,000. So the available community of, one, people that could open a restaurant, two, can work at a restaurant that's Chinese and understands the kitchen dynamics, or can speak the language, that is very small in comparison to where you think, you think there should, the funny thing is, people come from up north, they come down here and they have very high expectations.
Right.
And they complain. But I'm like, well, why isn't there a good Chinese restaurant in Boca Raton? Well, that's because Chinese people don't live in Boca Raton.
That's right.
Chinese people live in Lauderdale Lakes. they live in other parts of Broward County. And where's the good Mexican restaurants? There's none in Fort Lauderdale. Well, that's because they live in Lake Worth. That's because they can only afford to live in, outside of those areas. That's where the real taquerias are. That's where those things are. So you have to understand the dynamics of where you live and where other people live to find those good experiences. Otherwise, it's not legitimate. So it's a weird place. Like I said, we have this sort of combination of seasonal business with these sort of, I would say, snowbird kind of people that come in and out, seasons and not seasons. It is what it is. I love living here. I love the weather. It way beats New York's and New Jersey's, negative 20 below, winters, and the ice and the snow and the traffic and all that kind of stuff and the taxes we were paying. So, I mean, I live a much better lifestyle here, but I do miss some of those things. We had fantastic restaurants in New York City. We have fantastic restaurants in New Jersey, all different types of cuisines, all different types of ethnicities. But you have to make the best of where you live, and you have to get that intelligence. And I think that understanding the dynamics of where you live is very important to enjoying food. Where you live,
Well, and that's the thing. I love, going to New York, and my family, we've been up to the city a few times and stay in Manhattan, and just to be able to walk, 4 or 5 blocks and hit 10 awesome restaurants that have been there for generations, where, it's the family has run that restaurant forever. And it's not a lot of chain restaurants and not a lot of big, but then you can go get the higher end restaurant that's been, a Michelin star restaurant or what have you. But then you can go right down, 2 doors down, and there's a mom and pop place that's been there for 20 years that's got just as good food and totally different, experience. But you're right. South Florida is more, Panda Express is their best Chinese.
Yeah, we do have some good ones, but you have to know where to go. But
they're kind of hidden.
But because we are a tourist economy, the restaurants want to try to be something for everyone. So, for example, let's take barbecue. The barbecue restaurants here. Florida does not have a native barbecue tradition, right? Other than maybe I would say the Cubans doing cacachinas and stuff, which is different.
Right.
Or the Jamaicans doing jerk and stuff like that, which is different, right? We do not have a Southern U.S. style barbecue tradition at all. But because we are in the South and people come to visit, they expect barbecue. So unfortunately, what happens with barbecue restaurants in Florida is, well, they want to make sure that they have chicken. They want to make sure they have beef. They want to make sure they have pork. They want to make sure they have ribs. They want to make sure they have hamburgers. They have, all these things. But that's not the reality of what a barbecue restaurant is in a barbecue producing state, right? If you go to South and North Carolina, they're pork, right?
Right.
There are places that will only just do pork, and maybe they'll have chicken as a other thing, but it's rare that you will see beef in a South Carolina barbecue restaurant. You go to Texas, primarily beef. Almost 100% beef, whether it's beef brisket or beef ribs and beef sausages, right? Texas hot links are made out of brisket. They're not made out of pork. So they specialize.
And the only time you'll see,
the
only time you'll see it where they do have pork or something is because they've had a lot of requests for it, and like they'll just say, "Okay, we'll give in and we'll do some pork ribs."
But it's never as good as what they do normally because they cook at different temperatures. So if you mix your smoker, if you mix your rig with pork and chicken and beef, they're all going to cook at different temperatures, and you're not going to be able to pay attention to all of them at the same time. So they never come out. Those things never come out good. And unfortunately, in Florida, nobody wants to stick to their guns and say, we're going to be a pork place. We're going to be a South Carolina place. We're going to do pork. That never happens here.
Well, but you know what? You can use that though there's a lot of, I guess, family type restaurants or sports bar type restaurants that Just because I know I've been down there, Big Daddy's, you go to Big
Yeah.
Daddy's restaurant. He's got 4,200 things on his menu.
Yeah.
Because he's trying to,
Yep.
please everybody instead of, specializing in just, and you'll see this. I used to watch, the Restaurant Impossible shows where, some of these, they may be celebrity type chefs, but they know what they're talking about. And they go in, they go, why the hell do you have 250 entrees on your menu?
Right.
I mean, your food cost is crazy. You can't do any of them well.
This is what I tell the restaurateurs when they open a new place. I look at that menu. I'm like, you have way too much crap on this menu, sir.
Yeah, ma'am. Exactly.
You need to basically cut this down to a quarter and just do the top 16 things you do well. And that's it. I mean, listen, I went to New Orleans recently, a couple months ago, back in December. My wife and I went on vacation, and we went to one of our favorite places, Giacomo's, which is a legendary restaurant. Now, he is a smart businessman, Jack Leonardi. He decided, because of the pandemic and all this stuff having to do with supply chain and not being able to get certain things and what have you, he streamlined his menu to a greatest hits album of, a dozen things the top dozen things that everyone always orders, and he does really well. And I applauded him for it, because if he went to his standard 5-6 page menu, he would have gotten killed. He wouldn't have been able to keep his business running. And
that's where I think, like you said, if you got consistent quality and you specialize in something, that's what's going to keep bringing people back to you. You can have, just 20 things on your menu. If you execute them well and they're consistently, awesome, and, that's what you concentrate on and perfect, that's what people come back and love. They don't care if you got, today I want a Reuben sandwich, instead of making me, Chinese food, could you make me a Reuben? They don't care, but that's what, I don't know, some of these restaurants I walk in, when I see a menu that I got to fold, 5 or 6 pages of different stuff. It's just like, the food cost alone has to be killing them. That's why they're not making any money, it's because they got all these other food that's got to be used. You can't tell me if you're a burger place mostly, and then you're selling, you got, all these other things on the side, that stuff's not even getting used. You're just throwing it out.
You shouldn't be serving pizza if you're a burger restaurant. I mean, that's
exactly. So let's talk about what you're doing now. So you work now. You have some work you do with ZDNet and CNN.
Yeah. So I've been writing for ZDNet for 14 years as senior technology editor. So I cover all aspects of the computer industry, mobile technology, data centers, cloud, computer security, a lot of cybersecurity recently, you name it. So I kind of have, the ability to kind of write about whatever I want in an op-ed sort of a way. A couple of months ago, I also joined the freelance staff of CNN Underscored, which is their review website. And the first piece I did for them was on espresso machines. They wanted somebody who could really look at the tech of the espresso machines and try to figure out, which were the top ranked ones. And let me tell you, that was a hard article to do. I had 20 espresso machines landed at my house, and I was boxing and unboxing and, pulling shots and all these things. Trying to come up with a test rubric for this stuff, because you want to have the same consistent controls when you're doing stuff, right? So it came down to what kind of coffee beans I was using, how I was grinding them, and there was a lot of debugging involved in that, because some of these things are coming from Italy, and if they got knocked around in shipping, they might not be working when they got to you. So I actually had to open up some of these things up and do some electronics and plumbing work to fix some of these things up when they got here. And that was by far one of the most difficult writing assignments I ever had to do. The pizza oven one came next. That was also very interesting. I looked at, the Unis, I looked at the Gosnis, I looked at, Bertolos, I looked at Breville. That article will continue to grow with more products as I, add more and look at more. Right now I'm looking at the Gosni Dome. So we'll see how that one works out. That's a very expensive product. It's just kind of crazy, where home enthusiasts how much money they are willing to spend on some of these products.
Well, I tell you what, though, I had the Gosney Dome, and yeah, it's kind of pricey for what it is, but there's people that have these the Alpha ovens that are like $4 or $5 grand.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, it's not crazy if you compare it to something like that, where I have friends of mine that literally have the $5,000 Alpha, and yeah, you could probably put some casseroles in it and stuff like that and cook some chicken, but it's kind of a pain in the ass, when you come down to it. They cook pizza really well, but everything else is kind of a chore to kind of cook something in. You can do it to try to justify your expense, but I thought, when I had the Gosney, I only had it for a while and I just didn't use it enough. And I said, all right, I've done my review, I'll get rid of it. But at least it's not that kind of where I spent $5 grand on something to cook pizzas on. And then it looks pretty. It's a conversation piece, but so it's functional and it's pretty good for what it is. It is probably a little pricey from what most people would do. But yeah, and that's one of the things too. I like watching and doing some of my own reviews and then watching what other people do and how they review it. The way I look at it, I don't try to compare multiple things together. I try to just review one product at a time, or one or two. I'll compare one or two against each other. And the
roundups can be intense. I mean, the pizza one took us like 10 weeks to do it.
Right.
And that was just insane. I mean, the number of people we had to have overcooked pizzas for was actually insane. And that was a process because you're not going to be like a regular home chef where, all right, I'm going to cook a batch of pizza sauce, or I'm going to cook I'm going to make a batch of dough. Now we were making dough like nonstop. We had the KA going like almost nightly, just staging pizzas ready to, because if you want a good pizza, you got to ferment it for a good 72 hours. 3 to 5 days, to get the flavor and the fermentation you want and the gluten formation you want. We could not cook our own pizza sauce for this purpose. We went out and bought, commercial. We used like the best quality, like organic, canned one we could buy, like Mere Glen or Cento or something like that, just because the volume that we were doing. We had to cook a good 2 dozen pizzas in each oven before we felt confident on its performance level. Some of them we had to do more. So we were at a point where, our local neighbors were like, we had them on text alert. We're cooking pizzas tonight. Who's coming? And we had boxes, ready to go to put pizzas in, just shoving them out the door, just watching them, me observing them and watching cook times and all that stuff. So it gets crazy when you do some of these reviews. But it's interesting, you get into this sort of rubric of testing stuff, and then you finally come down with opinion. You kind of self-doubt yourself. For example, the Rock Box, when we eventually had to pit it against the Unis, right? The Coda and the Cara, where the Rock Box was originally marketed as a wood oven, but its wood hopper is horrible, and it really only performs well as a gas oven. But it does not have a replaceable. It doesn't have replaceable stone. So if you crack the stone, you're done. You basically have to drill through the casing to rip the whole front out, and kind of do a MacGyver approach of getting a stone in there from a third party. There was a lot I liked about it. Great heat retention on the stone, great insulation on it. It's compact. So it had things that I liked about it better than the Unis, but from its price point and its weaknesses, it did not get top billing. That doesn't mean that it's a bad product. It just means it didn't get top billing, right? From my evaluation and understanding how a typical consumer might use something, right? Which is kind of the top of the line on an article like that is yes, we are going after the consumer in this piece, not food geeks. Right. So we're trying to prioritize what a typical consumer would want. And then, of course, people would start screaming at me, like the Gosney people and the Gosney, user group are like, oh, my God, you don't know what you're doing. You don't understand pizza. I'm like, OK, well, I did this for 10 weeks.
Well, yeah. I'm like, I get that, too.
You might want to Google my background before telling me I don't know anything about pizza. But yes,
not only that.
yeah.
you get people like that, well, this review wasn't for you because you already
Right.
have your rock box and you love it. And that's what you love.
You made a
bought
personal
that
investment in it and you want to defend it, which I think is
Exactly.
weird with people. People get very weird.
No,
with
people do that
right?
all the time in the barbecue groups and even goodness, the Jewel versus Anova people in the sous vide groups.
Really?
They're
Wow.
cutthroat. Not as much anymore, but they were. It's like, no, Jewel's the best. No, Anova's the best. Oh no, this one's the best.
My response is, dude, they're made all at the same Chinese factory. in Shenzhen, they just stick the different label on it and a different piece of software in the microcontroller, and it's the same thing.
Yeah. So, but you get that. You get all the brand people that just, they love, the barbecue groups are the same, the grill. Nope. The Traeger's the best, or this one's the best, or that's the best. And everything else stinks. And they're just, it gets a little crazy. I've never been I like stuff that works well. And whether it's this brand or that brand. So I don't really care as long as it works good. I don't look at just the brand name and go, well, everything's got to be this brand, whether it stinks or not. I'm one of the first ones that'll tell you, I love, the Kamado Joe, ceramic grills better than a Big Green Egg because it includes a lot more stuff, but they came out with a temperature controller that just stinks, and I'd tell it on the people, hey, I love Kamado Joe, this particular grill because it's great. I said, but this other thing they make is garbage.
Whatever who they outsourced it to is a piece of junk. So it's interesting when you think about these companies from a legacy reputational perspective. You get into even home appliances. GE is not what it used to be. Or Wolf is not what it used to be. Or these companies have. Yeah, they put their label on it, but they're all made in factories in China or in Indonesia or whatnot. And, if you compare them qualitatively compared to what existed 20 years ago, there's a big difference between,
even some of these, barbecue companies, Weber, when they came out with their new pellet grill, totally changed their whole, they never had any kind of electronic, based grill before. Their gas grills were just gas. Their all their kettle grills and all their other grills were just basic, well made. Brand was great. When they first came out with that pellet grill, it totally changed. Now they got to have software, they got to have all these electronic components, and it bombed, man. They had issues right off the bat, and they got skewered because they had grease fires, they had all these issues. The software wouldn't update, and the motors were not working, and they'd never had a grill with a motor in it before. So they were like, it's totally, that's what totally something new for them. So
that's what kills me with these products is these apps, right? You can have the best engineering team make the best hardware in the world, but if your app sucks, that's no good. For when Lenovo first got started with Precision Oven, it was not a good app. And over the last year or so, it's gotten way better, way, way, way better. It's still not where I want it to be, but it's way better. But if you look at Breville's, the Joule app, whatever they call Breville cooking app for their quote unquote Joule oven, which is really just the Breville oven with a little bit of extra smarts on it and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. It's a very immature app. It's missing a lot of stuff that I would want, as a cook or a consumer. So all these things are evolving. All these electronic devices, all these consumer devices, all these kitchen devices. It's insane the level of technical complexity that some of these things are. Now if you look at we have one of those what's it called, Thermomix units, the TM6. That thing is like something out of Star Trek. If you look at it, it's ultimately it's a blender / food processor that has a heating element that can cook. But you look at the thing, it's got a touch screen on it that's color, it's Wi-Fi enabled, it's connected to the internet. You can pull up recipes from their database someplace. It's nuts what some of these things are now capable of doing.
A lot of little things coming out that aren't going to be, viable, but then again, you're going to get some of that stuff that's going to stick, and people are going to go, hey, this thing's going to catch on. I think the Anova oven it's in its infancy for sure. But it's, got a lot of potential to it. They're going to do some redesigns. There's some things that, like you said, that you don't like. There's some things about it I don't like, but for the most part, it does what it's supposed to do.
It does what it does supposed to do for sure. I mean,
and it does a lot of things that you can't do with any other oven. So it's a pretty good thing for what it is. I mean, for $5.99, I mean,
that's dirt cheap for what the thing does. It's dirt cheap for what it does. Yeah.
So, and I think that, they are going to, fix all the things that are wrong with it, and they'll probably come out with a bigger version and a more complex version. I'm sure if they can stay alive. They're having some problems with supply chain issues right now.
Well, they all are. I mean, they're owned obviously now by Electrolux, so that kind of helps them a little bit. But like everybody cannot get chips now. Nobody can get chips. I mean, this. I just found out that the car I'm picking up, the Polestar, there's actually an option in the package that I bought that apparently they don't have the chip for it, so therefore they have to install it at a later date down the road.
Yikes!
Yeah, it's that's where we are right now. And I mean, even things like pigments are hard to get right now for cars. Like if you want to get a car in like the certain color green or whatever like that, yeah, you're gonna wait like 8-9 months. If you want it in white or black, you can get it immediately. But like it's crazy.
Well, let's hope that all starts changing. But Jason, it was great talking to you. Is there anything else you want to discuss before we call it quits? I'm sure I'll have you on again some other time, because this is like I said, an ever-changing, ever-growing, field that we're talking about. I mean, like I said, I'm just so amazed at how, from just even on the outdoor cooking side, but when you combine the changes that are happening on the indoor and outdoor, and all the different things that we have today, it's just amazing to me. So. Yeah,
I could go days on this stuff. If you want to hook up with me online, I'm on at J Perlow on Twitter, and on Facebook. It's my group is called Foodies Who Review South Florida. If you just put that in the search, you'll find it.
I'll put that down in the description of the podcast so people can click on that and find you as well. But thanks for joining me. I appreciate talking about all this food and technology stuff, and I always love talking to other people that have the same interests as me. So.
My pleasure, Darren. I really had fun today.
I appreciate it, buddy. I'll see you again on the next time you're on. Well, thanks again for tuning into the Fire and Water podcast. I know I've been gone a while, but we're going to be trying to make this get back into swing here. Probably once every couple weeks, we'll have a new episode. But make sure you check out the links below. Check out Jason Perlow on CNN and ZDNet and everywhere he is. But make sure you follow us on the Facebook groups and the Fire and Water Cooking website, fireandwatercooking.com. Thanks for listening and watching, and I'll see you on the next Fire and Water Cooking podcast.